I'm out of my mind with excitement to be here, celebrating this book and Geddy Lee with all of you. You know, when I wrote that scene, I was thinking of the 14-year-old version of me that first saw Rush at the Nassau Coliseum in Long Island. And no, it's true. And I was not a cool 14-year-old. I was the kind of kid who walked around with like a briefcase of cassette tapes. And all of Rush's were in there. And so the thought that someday that 14-year-old kid would get to say, ladies and gentlemen, Geddy Lee, blown my mind.
You know, I don't think we played Philly till 1979. I bet you guys would know, is that correct? At the Spectrum, 1979, Blondie opening for us. Right on. Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be with Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Geddy, this is great. The book's amazing. I'm gonna try really hard not to go all Chris Farley on you and be like, remember when you sang My Uncle at a Country Place? It's really great. But, you know, man, when you came and did my podcast that day, we were at my apartment, and I remember I had this big decision to make, which was, would I drink my coffee out of the Rush mug that I had in my apartment? And I decided I wouldn't fake the funk, I would just show you. And you coming to my door, I thought was one of the most surreal things ever, but this tops it. Man, the book, writer to writer, right? I just have to say you really delivered something in this book. How many of you have it and have read it before you got it tonight? Anyone? It is, yes. This book is so honest and true, and in reading it, we get to spend real time with this human being we spent so many years listening to and kind of hoping he would be exactly the person that he is here in this book. So thanks for trusting us with No, I count that as a point. Any tears I get out of you, I count as a point. How is this? Yeah, we love you, Geddy. I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you how that feels to you after so many years. You know, I know you haven't picked up a bass guitar or guitar in a while, right? Only a couple of times in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a strange journey for me, especially since the last gig Rush did in 2015. There was initial sort of resentment, I guess, that Rush was over, and it wasn't really my choice to have it over. But so I was trying to deal with that, and then, you know, I guess it was just a little over a year from the last gig that we were informed that Neil was ill. And that, suddenly nothing mattered anymore. It didn't matter. My resentment disappeared in a heartbeat because all of a sudden I had a friend in crisis, and that's all that mattered. So, and it really took the wind out of me. And then, thankfully, I was doing this other book, The Big Beautiful Book of Bass, which really occupied my mind. Really helped me focus on something other than Neil's illness and, you know, the end of my band. So, after a time, you know, Neil was originally diagnosed. He was given 18 months, and he lived 3.5 years, which was amazing because he's a bull. And he hung in there as long as he could, but after he finally did pass, I didn't feel I had any music left in me. And it took some soul searching to try to reignite that thing, and writing this book was very cathartic in that regard. And I finally feel like I'm at the point now where I can embrace music again. So.
Wow, that's really exciting to hear you say that. Embrace music again, you definitely should. You know, in the book you write very directly and honestly about a complicated relationship you find yourself having with adulation, right? With accepting or receiving the kind of love that you get from all of us. But I was watching you Monday night in New York doing this, and I was watching to see how it would feel, but it seems to me that it feels good to you, doesn't it, to be out here now? And feel like,
I agree. You know, when I was getting ready for this tour, and I was actually rehearsing for it, which is a strange thing to rehearse for a book tour. So a friend of mine said, what are you doing? Practicing reading? I said, well, yes, kind of. You know, it just dawned on me that it felt kind of stiff, and I forgot that I'm going to walk into a room full of people that know me in a different way, and they're going to be throwing love at me, and so I'm happy to accept that.
Yeah, that's great, and yeah, try to loosen it up with the reading, man. You don't have to be so. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be so stiff. Did you have any kind of hesitations in really deciding to be this open? You know, you tell stories in the book, and we'll get into some of them, that are revelatory, like real revelations. And what was fascinating reading it is that they weren't like, it's just not the revelation itself, it's kind of what it revealed about you going through it, right? What you were feeling and what you were thinking. In Rush, we projected a lot onto what was you, what's Neil, how did that happen, where's Alex fit in? But here, it's kind of this unadulterated look into your heart. And was there any trepidation in doing it? And if so, how'd you get past it?
There wasn't, frankly, because at the time that I began to write it, it was the lockdown, the pandemic, and as I said before, I was grieving for Neil, and I was also not seeing my mom, who was suffering from dementia, and that's a terrible thing to watch. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. So when I finally got around, after being nudged by my good friend and co-writer Daniel Richler, you know, he was sending me stories, and he would write a story about his dad, and his father was a renowned Canadian writer, Mordecai Richler. And so he'd send me a story, for example, of a moment that his dad got angry with him, and then he would challenge me to write a story about a time maybe my dad got angry with me. And so I started to enjoy that process, and sooner or later my stories were getting longer, and he was saying, I think you're writing a book here. I said, okay. He said, I think you should write. And so once I made that decision, I thought the only way for me to do it is to be as honest as I can about, you know, what I've been through, how I feel about that. I mean, there's certain restrictions. I wanted to make sure that the only person I embarrassed in this book was me.
I mean, you do tell a story about Alex going naked through a window.
Yes.
So, I don't know if you're stuck to that. I don't know if you're really stuck to that.
He's allowed to embarrass himself. And, you know, of course, there's a few people that I couldn't resist a kick in the ass a little bit, but that's okay.
Steve White.
Yeah. But I didn't really, not being a schooled writer, not being a memoirist, you know, I didn't know any other way to approach it than to just try to be as honest. And when I'm talking about, you know, tough situations like what Neil went through more than once in his life, or my father's passing, I just tried to be respectful and delicate about what I, you know, talked about and how I represented someone who's no longer with us. So.
And I wonder if part of it also was, and we're going to talk about your dad and all that stuff, but was understanding the soft landing that was available to you from the people who'd been there for you for so long, meaning all the people out here.
All these folks. Yeah. Yeah, well, I hope they get into it, and sometimes I talk about things that are a little uncomfortable, but I think that's an important thing. Like, what is the point of a memoir? Is to give the reader some real insight into who this person is. So I don't see the point of doing it without at least trying to show my thinking and my personality. And some of the tough stuff explains why I've become the person I am.
And yes, should we sit and then maybe really continue in that spirit of honesty and diving in?
Yeah, it's Philly stuff.
Amazing. You heard of it? It's not. That's not pandering at all.
Shameless.
It's not pandering. So you talked about a little. You talked a little bit about you tell writing stories back and forth to come up with this, but you know, you've made the point. You say it. You mentioned in the book. You mentioned it to me when we talked on the podcast. That although we all thank you, you walk through the world and people thank you for the music. Yeah, we do, right? We do thank you for the music. We all talk about how you got us through these challenging moments in our lives. And you make it a point, though, to say that that's not ever been why you made the music. You're happy about it, but you didn't do it for that reason, right? You did it because you wanted to express something. But beyond the kind of back and forth, what is it that really made you want to write this book? Like, do this thing now? And like, whatever the feeling was you were trying to express, do you feel like you scratched whatever that itch was in doing it?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I described, for me, it was a way out of what was becoming a problem. My quote, reflective mood from all these losses was making me profoundly unhappy. I was becoming an unhappy person, and I had to find a way out. And I figured the best way to find a way out is to go back in time and to re-examine all the other moments of my life where maybe I experienced loss of a different kind, or did I have any, what we call, unattended sorrow that was preventing me from moving forward? And that's really kind of an important concept, and I think one that bears thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that as great memoirs do, this book this is not a book that's only, there is absolutely, like, sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the book. It being Rush, less sex, but
a lot of drugs.
Much to Gene Simmons' chagrin. Way more drugs than you ever let on to us that you were doing.
Yeah, we're sneaky.
I mean, you really were. It's like,
that's really funny. Okay, so, people come up to me since the book came out and say, wow, you guys did drugs. I'm going, we wrote a song called The Passage to Bangkok pretty early in our career. Did you think it was really about a train ride?
Well, it's because like over and over you guys would say, well, we're nerds, we're not like the other bands. You were just like, no, we're not like the other bands because we can trick them out of their drugs and do them. But the book is, so there is, of course, all that stuff. But the book is suffused with two things. And one, I think, is like the constant stripping away and reshaping of your personal identity. The word identity is early on in the book, and it's throughout the book. And it's through tragedy, misfortune, growth, betrayal, and loss, right? Those two things. How your identity keeps getting shifted through a loss of some kind. And Neil, of course, when we look at you, or we look at you and Alex, we all think of Neil. And you said it was cathartic, but to write about Neil. I like to think about who an author is writing for. So you write for yourself, but who your imagined audience is. Like Stephen King talks about his constant reader, and then J.D. Salinger talks about like the woman on the front porch. And I want to say, even if Neil wasn't in your head when you were writing, I think that Neil Peart would have loved this book. I really do.
Well, thank you for saying that.
And I have the thought many times that he would have loved the book. But I wonder how you felt reading Ghost Rider. which I think is an incredible book. Really a stunning, staggering.
Yeah, it is.
In fact, weirdly, there is an episode of Billions that was an homage to that in our minds. But I wonder if his work as a memoirist in any way affected you as a writer. If you felt like that was a thing that was there that you were in some way either inspired by or grappling with.
Well, that's a great question, Brian. I mean, Neil was a mentor to me in many respects, but we're very different people. And I think the one thing that played into our longevity that maybe is not talked about is the fact that we celebrated the differences in each other. We made fun of them, like on a regular basis, especially Alex, because, my God, there's so much to make fun of.
You just can't resist it.
He's low-hanging fruit, man. He's right here. He's right here. He's with me all the time. Yeah, he's low-hanging fruit. So what I'm saying is, our differences were our strength in many respects, and we did respect each other as being very different people. And our sense of humor brought three very different people together, and our very singular love of the kind of music we were playing. So we wrote and played really for ourselves. And we hope there's enough of you guys out there that had the same sensibility and that they would dig it, you know? So apparently there was. But finding my voice as a writer, an author, I still have a hard time viewing myself as one of those, but I have now put together 2 books with the great help from my co-writer Daniel. And that was very important to me to find out, to establish a voice that was not, you know, the way Neil would write, more conversational than the way Neil would write. And so I kind of focused in on me being me as much as I could be. And, you know, Daniel would sometimes come in and he would, you know, try to improve the grammar, which was easy because my grammar was terrible. He would remove a few thousand F-bombs, replace them with the word Effin, which is why it's so appropriate. But he had so much respect for my voice that he never did anything other than reinforce my voice. So I guess my long-winded answer to your question is, although Neil was a mentor to me, I really did not feel I wrote and think and created a book in the way he would.
Yes, for sure, a different book in its form and in the delivery system.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, if when I think about Ghost Rider, I think about a book about surviving loss and figuring out what your identity is now in the wake of loss. And this book, in a very different way, is it's a different trip, but it is covering some of the same terrain from your perspective, which is why I'm wondering. Well, I guess, did you read it a second time, that book, or did you make yourself not kind of read it again?
I mean, after I first finished it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you have to read these things over and over again to make sure you didn't fuck it up.
No, of course. No, I mean Ghost Rider. Like,
oh,
did
you
you
mean
think
Ghost
about
Rider?
it at all?
No.
Did you realize along the way that you were that in your way you were telling different, because his was an acute situation, yours was a long situation.
Well, Ghost Rider was painful to read because I was a participant from the distance. You know, when after those terrible tragedies happened, and he decided that he had to run. You know, all his friends were worried about him, and he wasn't very communicative, and he just disappeared. I mean, I was supposed to see him that summer before he took off. And something happened and I couldn't make it up to see him. He was rambling around his house alone, and it was, you know, it was a bad time, and I felt terrible that I wasn't able to get up there. And then he was out on this trip, and he would send postcards from away. So once in a while you get a postcard, and immediately you'd communicate with everybody who loved him and knew him and say, I heard from him. So it was like smoke signals to each other. Okay, he's okay. He's in, Alaska, for fuck's sake. Or, he's still there. He's still there. And so he would surface at a friend's house or his brother's place, and we'd get a report. And so there wasn't really any direct communication. So for me, reading the book, as much as I did respect how he put it together, much of it I already felt and had experienced with him.
That makes a lot of sense. In this book, it seemed to me, and
Not according to him.
well, you were in the band and then you were out of the band, right?
Yeah. No, I was kicked out of the band, and I was walking to rehearsal, and I was coming across this field, and at that time we were a four-piece. There was a kid named Lindy Young. Years later, of course, I ended up marrying his sister, but that's a different and he was the sweetest, still is, the sweetest guy on earth. And they made him do it. They made him meet me in this field and tell me, oh, good, the band is breaking up. I said, what? What words are coming out of your mouth? Like, yeah, the band broke up, and so rehearsal's off.
but we have to take a second and really take this in, because it's really hard for me to. I want to understand how all these disappointments happened to you, Geddy. And you were making progress in various areas, seeing freedom. Freedom is so important in Rush. It's so important in what you sung about. Whether, whoever wrote the words, you've been singing about this idea of freedom versus alienation, right, for so long. What gave you the ability? Because then you go back to the band. You go, it's you were in this band, it was getting popular, you get kicked out, you form another band, but these guys, your best friend, who, and says to you, it wasn't me, but still, he's playing with those dudes, and you're off over here. It also colors the story of you guys telling Rutsy he's out of the band differently, because you had the reason, which all these years people didn't understand. But what is it in you that allowed you? Because throughout the book, you don't just forgive people, you hold on to grievances.
I bear a fucking grudge.
Yeah. And yet, you found it in you to, when they came to you and they said, look, we made a mistake. Most of us would have said, yeah, you did make a mistake. I'm the singer. Go fuck yourself. But you didn't say that. Can you talk about, do you understand, did writing the book help you understand really what you were feeling in that moment?
Kind of, because, well, of course I was hurt that especially when I discovered the band didn't break up, they just reformed with a different bass player and changed their name to Hadrian. And I was like, what? Okay. So I got fucked over here. So rather than lick my wounds, I just started calling other players up. And I knew some other players that were good. But that was the desperation I felt to stay in music. I had to keep making music. It's like, if they weren't going to have me, fuck them. And of course, I created a little blues band, and we were working way more than them because they only ever did 2 gigs because they were so bad. But I take great pleasure in saying that. So why did I go back?
Hadrian sucks.
It's very simple. I went back because of 2 words. Alex Lifeson.
Yes. And we're all, obviously the 2 of you making music together has really been incredibly important in all of our lives. But did you express to him? Because that doesn't really appear in the book. No. You expressing to him that he hurt your feelings, or that...
I never said a word about it. John called me out of the blue and he said, look, I'm sorry, we made a terrible mistake, and would you ever consider playing with us again? And it just took me 2 seconds to say, yep, sure. and I broke up my band and I went back because I loved playing with Al. He was such a great player, and we made each other laugh like nobody could. And so, as I write in the book, and this is really quite interesting, I was driven to finally ask him. So I interviewed Alex. I invited him to my house, and I sat down and I interviewed him. I said, I have some questions for you, Al. I remember that time I got kicked out of the band. Like, what the fuck did you have to say about it? And he looked down at the ground, he shuffled his feet. Well, yeah, I was the kind of guy who just went with the flow, blah, blah, blah. And then he quickly turned on John Rutsey and blamed everything on him.
Did it ever come up over the years when there would be a band fight, because the book, I'll say as a real fan of the records, there's sections in the book where you talk about the record making, and actually where you take yourself to account for being too hard driving in spots, and it's an incredibly detailed look at the process of record making. But there were times where everybody wanted to tell everyone else to go to hell.
Yeah.
Did this ever come up in the history of...
Never.
You just buried it?
I just buried it, yeah. Never came up. Until I was writing about it. And then I was like, fucking curious. I've known you all my life, pretty much, so what the fuck? You had nothing to say about it? And he wouldn't cop to it. He wouldn't cop.
Even now, he wouldn't cop to it.
I think because he's embarrassed about it, and because... And he could be like that. He has always look on the bright side attitude, and it served him very well. When we were both going through the post-Neil, depression.
Yes.
He said, are you seeing anyone? Are you talking to anyone? And I go, yeah, I have a therapist, but I've had a therapist for a bit because while we were keeping this terrible secret about Neil, I was having a lot of problems dealing with that, constantly lying to my friends whenever they'd say, hey, how's Neil doing? And you'd say, oh, just fine. And so I got very good at being deceptive, and that was eating away at me. And plus, my band was gone, and my friend was dying, and that's a lot to fucking chew on. So, yeah, I was seeing someone, and he said, well, maybe I should. I said, yeah, I think it's a great idea. He saw a therapist twice. That's awesome. Hey, it's great. I'm fixed now.
Obviously, it worked.
But that's out. That's out.
Well, talking about Rush, it's like the promise of Rush and what Rush meant to me, and I think to a lot of us in a way, beyond, the impossible time signatures and F major with the added fourth and flat at seventh, was that it was like a haven for the isolated and lonely, right? It was a community, or is, I don't like saying Rush was, a community for, like, those of us who sometimes had a hard time finding community, right? And I just wonder, sure. There are other people who carried cassettes in a briefcase. It's nice to know, but when did you kind of realize that? And did you take that on? Did you understand it in some way that you were kind of holding out a beacon for people who had been through similar things?
It took a long time for us to accept that, to be honest. We just did what we thought was right. We talked about the things we thought were important. Of course, there came a time after the concept albums where lyrics got more personal, more philosophical, and we of course would get feedback from people about, man, that song, got me through a really tough time. And you start hearing that over and over again, and you actually start to believe it, And you go, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. And, sorry, what was that?
You said it's true.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it was when we did the song The Past that when I was singing that song, I felt it. I felt what we were talking about, that we were trying to extend a hand out to someone who might be struggling. And I tried to put all my heart into that vocal for that reason. You know, there's certain songs that write themselves, and for the most part, those start with a lyric that really just moves you, right? It just moves you. And The Past is one of those songs. There are a number of them in our history that you just don't want to touch the lyrics because you go, man, this is just, it says it like it is. You know? So that was one of the songs, and I think from that period on, we became more aware of, shall we say the word social responsibility? People don't like to say that word anymore, but it's something I do believe in, and I really believe in. And it was quite a shift from the early Ayn Rand, libertarian beginnings of 2112 and all that. But I mean, and frankly, what we always derived from Ayn Rand was an artistic manifesto, you know. And when we talked about that spirit of independence and individualism, it was always about not compromising, because we always seem to face the desire from others for us to compromise.
Well, but that is the thing, even beyond the lyrics, that I think was at play, was that we would look at the band and see people that we knew didn't have it easy. People we knew were told that they weren't cool, were told that their music didn't fit, and carried on, and were willing to look ridiculous. And I'm not just talking about some of the album cover costumes, but people who
Our
were
clothing, perhaps?
but people who were willing to reveal who they were and what they felt and what mattered to them. We talked once about the proficiency and how important proficiency was to you. And so I wonder if those things were part of what resonated for people. Was like, these guys are being asked, you can feel it, to be different than they are, but they insist on just being themselves. And you did it for yourself, but did you realize that that was also for us?
No, we didn't. Not for a very long time. And we didn't realize how our music was interpreted, and if it was interpreted the way we would have interpreted it. But it became a thing with us, you know, play for yourself, but believe that the people that are listening are not dissimilar to us. You know, they have the same sensibilities. So
yes, I want to end. We're gonna end this portion of it here, but I just want to. There's this great bit in the book where you say that seldom have I sung a line from any song. You're talking about bravado. You said, but seldom have I sung a line from any song that rings so true to me in my own personal experiences. We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. And you say, being so determined to be a musician and breaking my mother's heart in the process, the damage I'd done to my family life and my most important relationships. In all these instances, I naively thought I was prepared to pay the price, but I didn't really know what that was, but it was tallied up and presented to me. Anytime you follow a dream, there's a hidden cost. If you're lucky, it just won't be too dear. And I just wonder how you square that with finally finding a hope to press on. And
the hopes of something.
to press on, to keep going and to do it. Like that it is worth it. It seems at the end of this book we get to a place where it's worth it, right?
Well, it's all worth it. I mean, you know, it's like the song Headlong Flight, you know, I wish I could live it all again. I really feel that way, you know. I've been asked, do you have regrets? You know, yes, of course I have regrets. I wish I was more attentive to my young son after he was born instead of fucking off on tour after tour and checking in with my wife, making the assumption that she can shoulder all of that and still try to have a career. She's trying to have her own career. So yeah, I regret putting her in that position, and I think that perhaps had I not, maybe she would have gone on to her own creative greatness. But she's a magnanimous person, and so she sacrificed, it was touch and go for a while for her and I about this very thing. So, but we both realized at a certain point that there's something special in the way we care about each other and in our potential as life partners that made us fight for it, and there was a point where I really did not want to go home, and she didn't want me home. So I regret that, but at the same time, we got past that, and that's the beauty of life, If you start to listen, even if it's a little late, you can start to really hear what that person's saying, and if you care about them, you can do something about it.
Fucking A, man. Yeah. You are an inspiring motherfucker. Want to read a little bit of your book?
Yeah, sure.
All right, do it.
Okay, for tonight's lesson, I've chosen a thing which is kind of weird to talk about, but it's my voice. So let's talk about my voice, or maybe let's not and say we did. Okay, so I liked singing from a young age, and I wasn't insecure about it. I sang in the choir for a short time in public school, and later, when I did my bar mitzvah Haftorah, I was told I had a beautiful voice. You should be a cantor, my mom's friends would say. No thanks. But at that point, I wasn't screaming like the damned howling in Hades, as my reputation would later have it. I would soon be singing cream songs and blues songs in a sort of tenor soprano, or if you prefer, soprano castrato style. I was a fan of guys with a higher range, like Stevie Marriott with Small Faces and Humble Pie. Humble Pie's Live at the Fillmore was a hugely influential record to me and most of my peers. I Don't Need No Doctor was a huge song to me, and you can hear its influence in my early singing with Rush. Flipping the page, yeah. I would later often be compared to Robert Plant, and while he certainly pushed me into higher registers, I think a comparison with Marriott would be a bit more accurate. Because he had a soulful voice with a strong vibrato, but he rocked. Soon, John Anderson's mellifluous singing would affect me too. He had a high range, but his voice wasn't scratchy or abrasive. It was beautiful, soulful, and emotive, and not unlike a schoolboy chorister. I really wanted to sing like that. Another singer who impressed me was Roger Hodgson on the early Supertramp records. And I liked both Paul Simon and Joni Mitchell a lot. Through the years, there were, of course, many others. I was a huge fan of Bjork later in life. No one would think to make that connection. There are, and I swear, there are certain words I sing in Rush in a very intentionally Bjork-like manner. I wasn't always aiming for raspiness, I just responded intuitively. Where my voice went was out of necessity relating to what we were writing and the key we were writing it in. And when we were young, we weren't too savvy about keys. If the key we wrote in a song felt right, it would just have to make do. What we came to learn was that in certain lower register, my voice lacked power. But when I booted it up an octave, there was the power. Watching the movie Coda recently, I was struck by the scene in which the choir teacher tries to bring out his students' inner frustrations, coaxing her to sing from the gut. She's the only hearing member of a deaf family. Even if it's an ugly sound, he says, it will feel good. Turn your angst into power. And it dawned on me that my earliest vocal style may also have been rooted in my childhood, listening to the stories of what my parents had endured in the concentration camps, suffering all that bullying and alienation, so that when I began to sing, it all came rushing out like a screaming banshee. I was releasing all those suppressed emotions just by stepping up to the mic and screaming, "Yeah! Oh, yeah!" Of course, then I had to learn how to actually sing. John Griffin once wrote in the Montreal Gazette that I sounded like a guinea pig with an amphetamine habit. In Circus, Dan Nuger said, if Lee's voice were any higher and raspier, his audience would consist exclusively of dogs and extraterrestrials. I kind of like that. And in 1979, perhaps kindlier, John Rockwell would comment in the New York Times, Mr. Lee sings in a spare but unusual way, a brittle and androgynous tenor. Okay? So yes, my style did come across to some as quite abrasive, especially before we started making records. But you have to put yourself back in 1974. I mean, it's all context, right? Here we are in 2022, when I wrote this book. Our collective ears have become much more open. We've heard every style of music, every kind of singer, bands way heavier than Rush, vocalists even shriekier than I used to be. So imagine you're a critic back then in a reverberant arena. There's this three-piece band you don't know, and this hairy guy is shouting at you. I get that if you consider yourself more sophisticated than the average music fan, our 26 minutes on stage must have seemed like a loud mess. But we were truly into it, playing our parts with honest conviction. And raw or not, we were connecting with a growing number of people. I guess sometimes the official tastemakers are the last to know. Each new Rush album gave me another opportunity to improve as a player and a songwriter, but especially as a singer. It likely became so important to me because of all the heat I took for my voice over the years. So sometimes my attitude was like, hey, don't like the way I sing? Well, I politely invite you to fuck the fuck off and move along to something more suitable to your sensitive taste. Most often, to meet my own standards, if no one else's, I worked at it, and hard. And then, there's singing with a cold. There is really nothing worse than going out on stage in that condition, becoming hoarse, singing badly, unable to hit notes. And I did it far too many times. Now that's a special kind of torture. With our show must go on attitude, we resisted canceling unless it was absolutely unavoidable. So I went on stage with tonsillitis, croup coughs, even a bloody nose, swallowing the blood all the time. And with this nose, that's a large amount of feet. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back with questions and other fun stuff. And there's a little shameless plug that's going to go on the screen in a minute. But thank you so much, and we'll be back shortly. Knock, knock. Anybody home? Welcome to a different kind of music show. I'm trying to show the world that a bass player can do many things. That covers all the bases.
I feel like bass playing is so easy.
Don't say that! Join me, Geddy, singer and bass guitarist of the band Rush, as I travel to the homes of four bass legends and dive deep into their lives.
Wow, this is intense.
I'm full of surprises, my friend.
And their inspirations.
Canning is a lot.
Into a less ethnic world, I didn't think that it sounded very rock and roll. Lennon, Plant, Clapton, Moon, and Hendrix. Now those are effing rock star names. In an attempt at self-justification, I asked myself if Robert Allen Zimmerman had similar fears before he became Bob Dylan. So I combined my nickname and my middle name to create a professional moniker for myself and legitimize my new aspiring identity. A few years later, I took that even further and changed my first name legally to Geddy. by then, even my siblings were calling me Geddy or Ged, so it was all good. To people who asked, I explained that it was like in Leave It to Beaver, where the kid's real name is Theodore, and everyone, including his parents, called him the Beaver. So I had two identities right from birth, and now Geddy Lee made three. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'd like to invite a gentleman I've known for a long time and spoken to many times here in your city. His name is Pierre Robert.
Yeah, he was. I just love that. I just want you to get how special this is because, you know, we've all seen this gentleman in, you know, in performance on the stage. But what you're getting here, you're in his living room tonight. And you're hearing stories that, you know, it's really special. So, you know, freeze the moment if you can. Savor this because it's really cool. Before we go further, I want to talk about the upcoming show. I think it's on Paramount Plus.
That's right.
Show. Tell us about that.
Well, when I wrote The Big Beautiful Book of Bass,
an amazing book, by the way. How many do you have?
not enough.
Well, I don't know anything about guitars. It's just beautiful to look at the images.
Yeah, it was really a passion project for me to do that. And the thing that surprised me most about that was how much fun I had interviewing other bass players. You know, I got to do your job. And I met with some fascinating dudes. And one of them, Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones, you know, legendary guy. And, you know, my book was all about vintage bass guitars. And trying to get Bill to talk about bass guitars is not easy. It's the last fucking thing he wants to talk about. And you're talking about a guy who has written 9 books of his own, maybe 10 by now. He's a butterfly photographer. He invented his own metal detector for people with small hands. Small hands. What? Yeah. And he and his daughter discovered relics on his own property that are now in the British Museum. So it just got me thinking, you know, people have this preconception about what bass players are. Usually the guy is standing in the shadows, you know, by the drummer and holds his bass up like Bill did so he could check out the chicks. And, you know, some of us are pretty darn interesting. So during the pandemic, when I was writing the memoir, Sam Dunn from Banger Films, who did our first documentary, he wrote to me and he said, look, I love your book, I'm a bass player. Is there a documentary we could do about this book? I said, well, I don't know, let's talk about it. So we tossed some ideas around, and with Daniel Richler, my co-writer, and my brother Alan Wyman, who's a producer, and we came up on this idea based on those interviews, trying to go out and prove to the world that bass players are human too. Anyway, so then I had to make the damn thing, and that was really interesting because I had to be a host, and that's really not my thing. But, you know, of course I picked wonderful bass players, a few I knew, a couple I didn't really know, and we had such a great time. So I hope everybody does get to a few laughs watching.
And when will it start?
December 5th.
Okay, on Paramount.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And in your little program we gave you, there's a QR code so you can get it for free.
Nice.
Everybody loves a free thing.
I love it. So we have some questions from some of you who are here and some of you who have submitted these. The first, Geddy, I might need a little assistance with. This is from Fernie, British Columbia. I assume that's a town in British Columbia.
Oh yes, that's the great Alexander Zivovich.
You have a picture of him?
Yes.
would say his name.
Alexander Zhubinovich ask. What does he ask?
How do you say his name?
Zhubinovich.
All right, everyone repeat that. Never mind. So he asks you, can you describe the meaning of the word shreve and the origin of the word shraddus?
Okay, so you know who wrote that question. That guy. He sent it in. So a shreve is... Let's talk about the word shravis first. There's this word in the Rush lexicon, like we had our own language, and there are many words in the Rush lexicon. Shravis is a word that means when the situation is really kind of indistinct, unsure, unclear, messed up. Like, you know, if you're going to expect a gig to be set up in time and you get in and the gears everywhere, nothing's set up, that's a Shravis situation. And so when we first decided we needed an assistant on tour with us, we didn't know what to call him. So we called him a shreve because his job description was kind of Shravis. Anyway, thank you, Alexander Zhubinovich.
Thank you, Alex.
Now let's get to
Alex.
local people.
Oh, by the way, I was reading in the book, and as it goes on, there are the names Pratt and Lurkst. And those came about, they represent the other two members of your band, but how did those names come about?
Oh God, who can remember?
Because towards the end of the book, you only refer to them as Pratt and what's it?
Yeah, Pratt and Lurkst, and I was Dirk, and that actually became Peak, Leak, and Deek in our last few years. We had 1,000 nicknames for each other. It was always a thing, and Lurkst was, his name was mangled by our first tour manager, Howard Ungerleider. You may have seen him at the lighting board. He has this God complex. Let there be light. Anyway, he had this hilarious way of talking, and he'd take any word and just add some noises to the end of it. So Alex became Alerkst, became Alerkst, became Lurkst. And I can't remember the origin of Pratt. He probably was acting like a Pratt, so we called him that.
All right. Let us take a question from Alex DeAngelis. Says,
Wait, where are you, Alex? Are you here?
if you're here, you can stand up.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Alex. He writes, I've been a fan ever since I was born, thanks to my dad. My first show was July 17th, 2004 at the MGM in Las Vegas on the R30 tour. 26 shows later, my last show was July 25th, 2015 at MGM on my birthday. I asked you, was ending the Clockwork Angels tour with The Garden with that song, was that intentional, or was that just the way it worked out? And did you know that Clockwork Angels would be the last album? So first, did you intend to end it with The Garden?
Thank you. Originally, no. You know, that tour was very carefully orchestrated because we were trying to tell this. He's talking about the Clockwork Angels,
Yeah.
R40 or the...
Well, I think he's talking about R40,
R30, he's talking about R30.
Well, he was at R30, I think he's talking about...
Oh, he's talking about the album?
Yeah.
Yes. It was...
Oh, I get it. I get it.
Now I get it. Yeah, we always intended on ending with The Garden because in the story that Neil writes about this character who goes on this incredible life journey, this is the end of his life, and he's looking back and thinking about the good and the bad, and he's really philosophizing. And for me, personally, I think it's one of the most brilliant lyrics that Neil ever wrote. It's so full of wisdom, and I think hard-fought wisdom, you know. The man had a very difficult life, especially in the last 20 years of his life. And so he learned a lot of things, and he shared his wisdom with us, in particular in that song. So thank you.
And did you know that Clockwork Angels would be the last album? Did you think that when you completed it? Because
No.
you did it differently you took more time, you wanted to each be able to get back to your families, you didn't, you know, overdo yourself in the process.
Well, that whole period, you know, was all about Neil and his second family. You know,
Right.
he had found someone to love again, and he'd had a child. And so we tried to accommodate him as much as we could, because he needed to be with this new family. He didn't want to miss anything of Olivia's growing up. So that's why we recorded it in Los Angeles. We did a lot of the record in Los Angeles. And so at the time, of course, we did not think it would be the last record. And I wish we had done more, but that's not the way fate worked things out for us. So thank you very much for your question.
We have a letter from Tony, or a note from Tony DeRose, and Tony is in Lansdale.
Where are
Tony,
you?
are you here? Geddy wants to see everybody.
I want
He's
to
asking
see
the
you.
question. The question is, my wife asked me what I wanted for my birthday this year. My birthday is October 23rd, and my response was to come to your book tour. Wow, I love the big, beautiful book of bass, and I love the lyrics. The professor's lyrics are timeless. How did you come up with the bass lines that complement the lyrics? For instance, on Free Will, how easy was it to come up with that famous bass line?
Well, thank you. I have some advice for you. You have to ask for more expensive gifts when you. Seriously, the most fun for me is playing bass. More than any other aspect of my job with Rush, where I was on the Rush, I love to play bass. So writing bass parts it's just the best job. It's just so much fun, so interesting. And sometimes I write the bass part and then I write the vocal melody around the bass part. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the bass part. And sometimes during the recording session, after I hear Neil put down his rhythm section, I start changing it to accommodate some of his movements. And that's really a great back and forth. Neil and I used to talk about improvising in the studio, and once we kind of got our on the same wavelength, it was great fun to lay down these tracks. And sometimes, like a song like The Anarchist, for example, I put the bass tracks down, and then I went in and sang all the vocals, and then I went to play the two live, like in rehearsal, and it was like, fuck, man, I can't do this. The vocal has a completely different rhythmic pattern to what the bass is doing. So what do you do? So I sat in my little studio at home and I played that bass part over and over and over and over and over again until I didn't have to think about it anymore. And then I could try to sing it, and like a drummer kind of split my mind into two. And thankfully it worked out. A song like Free Will, of course, a lot of that song was driven by the bass part. I mean, it really is an integral part of that tune. So it was relatively easy to sing and play at the same time, but how we came up with these ideas, I can't even remember anymore. But, I always loved to play Free Will, obviously, because that's a song that I can really show off a little bit.
Giant block of Rush Cafe Free Will, and also played Headlong Flight.
Thank you, man.
No, it was fun. I mean, well, I love to get into the deeper cuts, you know, there's Spirit of Radio, but there's so many other beautiful, deep songs, and the fans always want to hear them. So I just think it's important to throw
That's
those
great.
in.
Thank you.
Matthew Clark in Moorestown, New Jersey. Matthew, are you with us?
Everybody. Hey.
There you are. Cool. I first heard Rush in 1982, Free Will, Limelight, Spirit of Radio. I've been a fan ever since. My first show was Hold Your Fire, and I've never missed a tour since. I have always been fascinated with the progression and the evolution of the band. You never seemed satisfied to try to recreate a specific sound. And when you look back over your career in the various eras of the Rush sound, what are you most proud of? And when and if you go back and listen to your albums, which ones still make you say, wow?
Well, thanks. That's a complex question. I'll do my best.
Two-part questions are always tough.
Yeah, but it's okay. You know, what people always want to know what I'm so proud of about my time with Rush, you know. And there are many answers to that. I'll try to answer them without getting too emotional here. I had the best partners ever. So funny, so considerate. Maybe Alex could be inconsiderate sometimes. I forgive him. No, they were just so great, and we wanted to make the same music. And even when one of us would push in a different direction, we'd give them some latitude. We'd say, okay, let's try that, and we'd try that. And that's why our musical catalog and our history is not a straight line. You know, it's like a rocky ocean, because you know, we would go where our curiosity took us, and that doesn't necessarily make good commercial or practical sense, but it was true to the spirit that we had, and we all had that spirit. And even when I pissed Alex off by adding so many keyboards that he was pushed in the corner, he didn't hold it against me for very long. And at the time, he was always supportive of that. You know, and it would just later he would go, man, that was fucking hard. I don't think I want to do that again. Yeah, so that's the first part of your question. I think, what was the second part?
If you go back to
the other ones that I listened to, what records I listen to now? Well, okay, so because I never used to listen to our old records. You know, I didn't want to look back, and for many years I didn't. You know, when they came on the radio, I would listen with curiosity. But during the last few months of Neil's life, this is a long answer, but bear with me. When he got to the point in his illness where he could no longer drive, he had a friend, a very good friend, who drove him to his Bubba Cave. You know, he had this office, this garage. He kept all his fantastic cars there. You know, he called them the Silver Surfers. Mm-hmm. And he had a little office there, and he had his motorcycles hanging from the ceiling, and it was really his happy place. But on the way to the cave every day, he started listening to our records one after the other, and analyzing them and thinking about it. And part of the last conversation we ever had was I was visiting him in October, I think it was, maybe late October of 2019. And it was very important. You know, we'd finished dinner, Alex was with us, and we always used to visit him and try to make him laugh, because he was going through a lot. And his family was going through a lot. So he always had to have a smoke. Like every so often, like clockwork, that man had to have a smoke. So he went outside onto his balcony upstairs to have a smoke. And I said to Al, I'm going to go up and sit with you. We went upside, sat on the balcony with him, and we just started talking. And we talked about parakeets that are in his neighborhood. He loves birds, I love birds. And then he started talking about our music. He talked about how proud he was for all the work that we had done together. And it was very important for him to tell me that. He wanted me to know that he thought, as a bass player to a drummer, he was very proud of all those records. And he didn't discern one over the other, but he listened to them all. And, you know, that was the last conversation I ever had with him, was that night. So, when I was doing my book, I said, well, I'm going to take a page out of Neil's, you know, own mind. And I started listening to all of our records, from beginning right to the end. And I started writing down my thoughts, you know, my instinctive thoughts. And there were some songs that I found really cringy that I couldn't listen to. And other songs I was like, fuck, man. What the hell? How did I get that bass sound? You know, I had that bass sound in 1975. I was looking for it for the rest of my life. So it was a wonderful experience, and one that I don't think I would have done had Neil not shared that story with me. So thank you for your
Last number of years, we've lost so many rock stars. Some we knew were coming, some we didn't see it coming. David Bowie among them, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And I didn't see this coming. And what fascinates me about this is that you guys were able to keep this contained within a very small circle once you learned what was going on with Alex for almost 3 years, because earlier you had said they gave him 18 months and he lived 3 and something years. How were you able to keep that under wraps?
Well, it was really hard, and it's unnatural,
Right.
of course, but
That's what he wanted, right?
That's what he wanted. He was fierce about people not finding out. And so you have to make a choice. Honesty or loyalty, and I choose loyalty.
Tina Rabbit from Atco, New Jersey. Tina,
Where are you?
Hi, Tina. Hi, Tina. So we were just talking about birds, and I saw this earlier, so I wanted to jump ahead to it. What is your favorite type of bird? And if you could own any type of bird, what would it be?
Okay, like birders are a special breed. I love birds. I love bird watching. One of my secret wishes is to be a great bird photographer, so I practice it all the time. There's many birds I love. It's really hard to pick one. Recently, though, I had an old 1961 Fender Precision bass, and when I bought it, I thought it was an original finish, but it turns out it wasn't. So it was like, okay, it's still a great bass, but what do I do with it? And then I noticed this guy who paints birds on basses, on guitars and stuff. So I contacted him and I sent him some pictures of one of my favorite birds, which is a bird you can only find in New Zealand, in the mountains of New Zealand. It's called a kia, and it's one of the world's largest parrots, and it's a mischievous little bastard. I mean, they will steal the little plastic things off your tires and let the air out of your tires. They will steal the door stops. Yeah, they're naughty. They're very naughty. Anyway, so I had him paint this beautiful Kia on the base, so I'm going to go with that. And what's the last part of the question?
No, I think that was it. What kind of bird would you be? Dan, you said a Kia, right?
Yeah, okay, I'll be a Kia.
Here's a fun one from Matt Nucci. I hope I'm saying it correct. Matt,
Matt, where are you? Where? Hey,
Matt, you are. Hey, Matt. So, this is priceless. I own a brewery, and I make a beer called Rye Barchetta. My wife and I and about 100 or so other fans were fortunate enough to spend the day with you and Alex back in 2018. This was at the Peller Estates Winery for your Grapes of Humanity fundraiser. And my question is, do you think you'll ever do an event like that again with your fans?
Oh, sure, I'd love to. I mean, I do a lot of fundraising, and I drag Alex with me every time. And, you know, he's great. He's the funniest man on earth. And so the two of us together just love to help other people. We love to try to raise money, and that is a great event. We haven't done one in a few years, but I think we're overdue for it. So thanks for the reminder. Go do one again.
Speaking of special events, before the pandemic, I don't remember the year, but I went to it. I went to Toronto to see the SARS concert.
Right.
And it was a stunning lineup. Rolling Stones, AC/DC, Rush, The Guess Who, and so many more were on that bill. And in your book, you describe a moment when you see a little glimpse of the audience walking towards the stage, but it's not till you're up on the stage that you see, holy shit, look how many people there are there.
Yeah. What I thought was this weird thing, was the horizon, and the horizon was alive. There was over 500,000 people at that concert.
And it wasn't LSD.
No, not at that time. Yeah, some amazing night.
There's another great moment in a photo of it in the book where you guys are, I don't know where you are in the backstage area of the SAR show, but Alex has got a smile from ear to ear, and there's a gentleman who had walked past him. At first glance, he seemed to be an older gentleman, and then you mouth to Alex, Max, tell us who
That was Neil. That was Neil. So,
Okay, all right.
yeah. So we were about to go on stage, and Neil, Neil, believe it or not, had stage fright, and he got nervous before every gig. And so before a gig, he's in a mode, he's in the zone. And we use these things called in-ear monitors, and once you put them in your ear, you can't hear someone just talking to you. You have to be put into a microphone to hear them. So he's in the zone, getting ready to go on stage to play for 500,000 people. No big deal. And Charlie Watts had made his way past me, and he wanted to say hello to Neil. Mutual respect, because Neil loved Charlie's solo work. I mean, he loved Charlie as a drummer, but also he was a big fan of his solo records. So Neil is in his face, and here's this old guy standing there, and he's totally kind of blowing him off. And it's like, I'm trying to mouth the words, I'm going, it's Charlie Watts. And he looks at me and he goes, oh! And he pulls out his earplug, and then a shit-eating grin on his face, and he shakes his hand, and it was a wonderful moment. So, yeah.
More questions from our audience. This is Matthew Clark in Morristown, New Jersey. Matthew, are you with us this evening?
Matthew, where are you, buddy?
Matthew.
There it is.
There it is. All right. So Matthew's question is, I first heard Rush. I already asked this one. I didn't mean to smoke that pot before All right. Sorry, we'll move on to the next question. Damien Sereni in South Jersey, right outside of Philly. Damien, are you here?
Come on down. Hey, Damien.
There he is.
Love you. I love you more.
I'm a 22-year-old bass player, and you have always made me want to make the bass more than just an instrument. Being that I've had many struggles, how do or did you ever keep the passion for playing alive? When you feel self-conscious about yourself, how do you keep going?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. I love playing. I love playing the bass. I never chose to be a bass player. Nobody chooses to be a bass player. You're usually a guitar player, and the bass player quits. And they say, hey, why don't you play bass? But I really took to it, and I don't know, I used to sit in the car when I was a kid going to work with my mom or my dad, and they always had the radio on, and I'd listen to Motown. And the great thing about old Motown songs is the bass is really loud. You know, songs like My Girl, or, oh God, there's just so many, and the old bass playing of James Jamerson, and you hear these beautiful, fluid, melodic, and if you imagine to take those parts away, the song would just not move in the same way. So when I got into playing bass, and I first realized, fuck, I can do this. I can figure these songs out. That was like a miracle to me, because I was this quiet kid that, hadn't really found anything that turned me on. So the minute I had that connection with the instrument, there was no stopping me. And all I did was rehearse, and practice, and want to have a life in music, and buy records. And so I would just say to you that you love playing bass. Fuck everything else. You don't have to think about anything else. Just keep loving it and keep playing.
A question from Tom Rouse. Tom is in Hamilton, New Jersey. Tom, are you with us tonight? Hey! Is that Tom? Oh, are you Tom? Oh, good.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
We've established that much.
Making a spectacle of yourself in front of all these people.
I'm a lifelong fan. I'm a bass player for 40 years. My current go-to is a 2020 Rickenbacker 4003 S5. And good choice. Question is, what is your opinion on 5-string basses? And do you or have you ever played one recording or live on stage?
Okay, yes, I did play a 5-string bass. I had a 5-string wall bass that I used to play around the Hold Your Fire period, I think. It was a fantastic bass, but 5 strings is a lot. It's one too many. I have 6-string basses now, I have 5-string basses now, and I have a really interesting 8-string bass that Rickenbacker made years ago, but my favorite still is just those 4 strings. They're so hard to master. And I see on social media, I see these clips of, young people of all genders, and they are playing these 5-string basses, and they are amazing. So I think the next generation of bass players will blow us all away, and I'm really pleased to see that. It's amazing to see that, the inclusion that the world of musicians has become. It's just fantastic. So, yeah, I have 5-string basses, but it's not my jam.
Every band has got them. In the days before tour buses, bands would fly to a certain area and rent a little fleet of rent-a-cars and travel to wherever they needed to get to. And you tell a story in the book that I quite liked. It was a long road trip, and people get bored and they get mischievous, and it was a rent-a-car, and if I understand correctly, you woke up to find that the windshield had been altered in a rather major way.
Yes, well, that's Alex Lifeson and Howard Underliver. I fell asleep, and they were probably high, I would say. And they had found every sharp object in the van and stuck it into that tarry goo that's between the glass and where the glass connects to the car itself. And there were corkscrews and pens and knives. It was a fantastic bit of art. I was like, what is going on here? That was just one of the things you get up to on a long drive.
A small antenna farm. Any other road stories come to mind that just jump out at you that you go, oh my God, I don't believe we lived through that?
Well, there's so many. The one I alluded to earlier when we were on our first tour, very early in the first tour, we were driving to Cleveland, and we were driving, smoking pot, and Alex and I were working on a song in the back seat. It was the song "Making Memories," and so we were writing and we were having the best time. And all of a sudden, I looked at the window and there's a sign for Memphis, and I'm like, "We're coming from Chicago. Cleveland is not." You know what I'm saying? I said, "Hey, Hearns, is Memphis on the way to Cleveland?" "I don't think so." And they're like, "Holy shit." So he had to turn around, and in those days, there were no cell phones, no internet, no nothing. So we had to get to Cleveland. And so he stopped at a gas station, got onto in a phone booth and booked a flight in Evansville, Indiana. And we were tearing to Evansville. And at one point we went through a rainstorm, and then there was a flood with water coming up to the windows. Everything was conspiring against us. And we got pulled into the airport just to watch our flight take off. And so Neil just basically sat up and he said, "Howard, let me drive." And he got behind the wheel and he drove all night long until we got to Cleveland. And I think I put the picture in the book. There's a picture in the book from that drive. Once we got to this hotel outside of Cleveland, they'd given our rooms away, so we had to sleep in this big conference room. Come on. So they pulled all these cots in and we just had to go to sleep. And I have this picture. Neil was so asleep, so fast, so deeply. We were all taking pictures of him. Just fucking around. Man, he's really tired. But anyway, that's one of my favorites.
Geddy, pardon me. The woman in the 7th row appears to be having a baby. Could you move it along, please? Wrap it up now.
All right, that's our cue that we have.
One last question.
One last question, and this touches on, I think another book that's coming, and I have one to close with that I must ask you afterwards. But does your baseball memorabilia collecting get in the way of the music, or does the music get in the way of the baseball memorabilia collecting?
Now, who asked that question?
Sorry, that's Mark in Warrington, Pennsylvania. Mark,
Where are you?
Hi,
Mark. How are you, man? So, I'm a collector. You know, I collect. I'm really an idiot. I'm an idiot, and I have a problem. but it's a good problem. It's a really fun problem. And so, no, none of those things get in the way of each other. In fact, sometimes they're a great distraction. You know, when I'm on a long tour or it's really effing boring, I just lose myself in baseball or lose myself in finding some relic that I've always wanted to have. So there's always,
but these are,
sorry about that.
these are all films.
Blue Jay guy, you know, we didn't get very far.
These are vintage Philly hats that my producer Pancake loaned us for the evening.
Anyway, thanks for your question, but I think you have room for all the insanity you want to make room for. Yes, I thought that's something you should bring up. I was at Game 6. Sorry. He brought it up, not me. I wouldn't be rude.
Isn't there a baseball book coming, or is that another TV show?
No, I know I'm so.
Well, you've got a lot of stuff going on.
I got a lot of stuff going on, but I'm having a sale, and I'm selling some of my baseball stuff because I have just too effing much, and I have 350 bass guitars, and I have, and I ain't getting any younger. So I decided to release some of my beauties back to the world of collectors, let other people share. And my view on this is quite simple. You know, it's like when you find a great old house and you move into that house and you think you own it, but you don't really own it. You're just taking care of it for a while. And so that's what collecting is like. You know, you're taking care of these things for a while and then you move them on to other people that are more passionate perhaps about that thing than you currently are. And so that's why I'm doing that.
I'll take one of your faces.
Will ya? You can't have one, dude. Two more questions. I happened to be at the forum last September, when Dave Grohl, God bless him, put on this amazing tribute to his friend Taylor Hawkins. Dave and Taylor inducted you guys finally into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which all of us had wanted many years before that. And if you haven't seen the video, it's a very funny induction. And these guys, all three of them, have a tremendous sense of humor. There is this massive event. There was the London one first, and then a month or so later, I flew out to be part of the LA one. And so I didn't even know you guys were going to get. There were so many artists, and all of a sudden Dave Grohl introduces Alex and Geddy, and you come out looking vibrant and wild. And on the drum kit for 2112 Part 1 Overture is none other than Dave Grohl. Not too shabby. And my memory of it, which is a little fuzzy, because I'd been on the floor for 9 hours. What
were you doing on the floor?
I was watching the show and drinking beer. And my memory is that went directly into Working Man, and Chad Smith from the Peppers took over, and that went into YYZ, and Danny Carey of Tool was there. And I believe there was one transition where the song didn't even stop, where the drummer kept going, and one of the other ones just stepped in.
Yeah, Dave just passed the baton over to Chad. That was an incredible couple of days, it was very emotional for obvious
Because
reasons.
the Forum was the last venue that Rush played at the closing of the R40 tour.
Yeah, and so you're looking at, first of all, 2 events to celebrate the life and sadly the passing of a great person, Taylor Hawkins, who was an amazing human being. He was a great drummer, of course, a great rocker, but He was a lovely, expressive guy, honestly. And I had just gotten an email from him. He was like that. Every once in a while, he would send a note and just check in. Hey, dude, what are you doing? How come you're not out there playing, man? Come on, get the fuck off your ass. Get out there. That was the kind of guy he was, you know. So just being a part of that was important to us to do. Dave Grohl is the most incredible human being I've ever met in my life. He's just, he understood how difficult it would be for Alex and I to come back and play without Neil. And yet, he said, you know, you were so important to Taylor. I can't imagine doing this without you there. So I said, yes, of course, immediately. But he was very aware of how difficult it would be. And so he said, one thing you cannot do is play with one drummer. Because then everyone's just going to say, that's the new Rush. So let's divide it up amongst all this room. You know, I don't want to play the really hard ones. You can get someone else. But anyway, so it was a great event. We paid tribute to him, and I got a chance to pay tribute to Neil. And because we were at the Forum, it was a cathartic moment for me. And in a way, we were able to reclaim those songs for ourselves again and feel good about playing the songs, whether Neil was with us or not. And that's important for us to move on, and I think you know, it was a real lesson.
Well, as the Street Fighters, a lot of people wondered if they would carry on without Taylor, and many said they would not. Would you see any possible musical project with Alex and some other musicians in the days ahead?
Who knows? Can't say.
All right, and that was not a no, ladies and gentlemen. I remind you, that was not a no. My final question, and this, to me, my favorite Rush song is a beautiful number called Time Stands Still. And we were in the Caribbean, Barbados maybe, when you recorded that one, I'm not sure, but there's so many things that make it special, most importantly the lyrics. My friend Jason turned me on to it. And Amy Mann, her magnificent vocals of Till Tuesday fame. There was some talk you wanted Cyndi Lauper or Chrissie Hynde, but sometimes things work out for a reason.
Yeah.
And she was perfect. But the message of that song, I think it's something we can all take out of here this evening, because the concept of freezing the moment, of right now. That's why I said when we began, and I'm sorry we've gone on a little longer, but you don't mind, do you? But the idea of savoring a great moment, of right now, doesn't mean you can't plan for the future, but don't pine over the past. Live this moment and freeze the moment. What do you think of that?
Well, of course. I mean, when Neil wrote that song, you know, it sort of showed that he was wise beyond his years, because it takes a lot of living to learn some of the things that he talked about, and not your typical rock and roll fare to, you know, opine about how special it is to realize the moment you're in with whoever you're with and appreciate who you're with. And it's foreshadowing, because, you know, his life was truncated, sadly, by this disease, and so he did his best to, you know, freeze the moment as much as he could, and he fought so many difficulties that one man should never have to fight all that difficulty. So it sort of lives on, that song, as will our appreciation of him, and so that's how I feel about it. So it's time, I think. I want to do something with all of you. I would like to take my picture with all of you. Before that, I would like to ask the great Brian Koppelman to come out on stage. Where are you, Ryan? Did you fall asleep back there? There he is. Yes, let's hear it for Brian Koppelman. Come on. Fantastic. And so the three of us, if we could just stand up, I'm going to ask you guys to make yourself as large as possible. And we're going to put this photo on Rush.com, and you can download it for yourself so you can have it. And we have the great Richard Sibbald going to take a photo. Come on, Gary. All right. Make your presence known.
sleep. Thoughts just keep coming. Desire to keep your pictures are